there is a married couple named Rachel and Yaakov, and they have a son named Benjamin. And they also have workers, laborers, who actually have a gigantic field. Okay, how many acres? It might be about 2 acres. Maybe some of you know of how big 2 acres is. That's a lot of work if you're doing it by hand, right? So here is the farmer. They have the laborers, they have the workers. They work early in the morning and they work till late in the evening. What happens is that they're tilling their ground, they're getting their land ready to go, and they have loads of seed to be able to put down into the field. In the field, they are going in there and walking up and down, very laboriously, right? They're throwing weeds all over the place. And then it's late in the evening, and people are ready to go to bed. I mean, you probably know, you work so hard in the jobs that you've done, and you're like deadbeat tired, and you want to go to bed. You're tired. And so these guys were definitely working really hard. So they went to bed, they go to bed. Well, anyway, Yaakov has a competitor who does not like him. He goes through his field, and he actually sows weeds in that field. And so he does this at night. He has no idea that he did this. So Yaakov and Rachel and Benjamin and the laborers, they don't even see this because the seeds are very similar. Okay? So weeks go by, months go by, and then the servants come and tell the owner, "Did you not sow good seed?" The owner says, "I have sown good seed." "Well, then where did these weeds come from?" The owner says, it was done by an enemy. So what happens is that the servants tell the master and the owner, is like, "Do you want us to pull them up?" He said, "No. What's going to happen is if you pull the weeds up, it's going to pull the wheat up right along with it." So he says, "Let them grow together and not be pulled up. Let's wait until harvest season." Harvest comes around, and the owner said to his servants, "I'm going to tell my reapers to go ahead and take care of the wheat." So it comes that time, and they have an interesting time to be able to do it. First of all, the laborers dealt with the weeds first. They pulled them up, and they put them they bundle them up, they tie them, and they throw them into the fire. But then after that, here is the good wheat. The good wheat that the owner wants to be able to place the wheat into his storehouse. Wow. Okay, so you got that picture. So they worked really hard. They were able to separate it, but now they have this good wheat. Now let's get to the gist of the story. Let me go ahead and pause on this biblical story, and let me share with you what it was like if you went back to first century biblical times and you were a farmer. Now, this is going to be interesting for a guy like me who is a town guy trying to be able to teach some people out here who actually are agriculture people, who actually has worked on the farm before. Okay, so I hope I do this justice, okay? So if I do something that is not right, tell me, all right? Okay, so here is I have a field, and it has to be tilled, it has to be well ready to go, and it has to be planted with seed. Well, if you go back to Israel, planting season is usually around between March, April, May, somewhere in there, back in the land. And you have it where they place it in the ground. So when it gets to that place, what do you get? You get amazing grain, right? It looks like this. Well, of course, this is actually Hobby Lobby bought, so. But, and this is rye, but let's just imagine that this is wheat. Okay, so they have this wheat, and so what they would do is that you would have an instrument called a sickle. All right. Now, of course, modern times, if you have hundreds of acres, you have a huge machine called the combine, which actually does all the work for you, and then you get it all bagged up and send it off, and well, you get whatever you get for it these days for a bushel. So what they would do is that they would go ahead and they would go to the ground and they would chop it. And then what they would do is that they would take a handful and they would put it on the ground, right? Like this. And the other person would just be chopping away at the ground of it. And then there would be another person who would come and then they would hold it in their hand and they would bundle it. They would bundle it. They would tie it together. Okay? But here, let me share this with you. In Leviticus chapter 23, if you want to go there with me, Leviticus chapter 23, verses, let's see, 9 and 11. What happens is that the first handful that is bundled together, that is tied together, it says this. The Lord said to Moses, speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I am going to give you, and give you its harvest, bring to the priest a sheaf to the first grain of harvest. He is to wave the sheaf before the Lord, so it will be accepted on your behalf. The priest is to wave it on the day after the Sabbath. So, it's interesting. First fruits, anything that was any kind of crop, the Israelites needed to give it to God. They had to give it to him, and that this was his. The rest of it, of course, so let's say we'll lay this on the altar, and this is actually given to God. Okay? So we'll place that right there. All right, now the next batch would be that they would take some more, and they would take it, they would bundle it, but of course, it's pretty sappy. I mean, it's still moist, right? And so it has to dry. So after the grain dries, they would come over to another place called the threshing floor. Okay? And I have to make mention of this. My wife actually did this artwork. If I don't, I'll probably get myself in trouble.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happens is that they come over here and they lay it on the ground. So what is the threshing floor? The threshing floor was a place where it was on the side of a mountain or on top of a mountain, and it was very windy. It was extremely windy. So here is what they would do is they would lay this out. It was a circular area. If this would go all the way around, this would actually be a pretty good area to do some threshing. So there's a couple of tools that they would do. You can imagine with me, for instance, if there's like if this rake was like a rod, and you would think of a rod, and then you have another piece that is like maybe like about this size, and they would have there would be two pieces. And this instrument would be called a flail. And a flail was an instrument where they would tie them together, and this would be able to get your stress out big time if you want to do this. You would have wheat on the ground, and you would whack, 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 whack. You would hit it really hard just to be able to separate the grain head from the stalk. But another instrument they also used was called a threshing sledge. Okay? What they would do is that, if you can imagine with me, a piece of board like this, and there were like two other pieces on each side. And they would take and they would put holes all over the boards. And inside of it, they would put like little sharp pieces of rock or metal, and they would use farm animals like oxen, donkeys, or whatever kind of farm animal, and they would attach that to an animal, and they would put this on top of the grain, and they would go around in a circle to be able to separate the grain head from the stalk. Okay? And what would happen is that you would have all of these little pieces that would be like this, and they would break it up, and what was left is that you would have straw. This straw would go to the cattle or the livestock that would feed their animals. So now, what do you have to do next? Well, I'm going to take this, and the next part is that the next part of the harvest season was that they would take a rake. Of course, I don't know, was this Home Depot or Lowe's, or I don't know if it was some other store, but they didn't have those back then, by the way. So they would have a wooden handle like this, and they would have pieces at the end where there would be four